Hi there, my name is Diane, but you can just call me D. In today's video, we're gonna be talking about books and their superlatives. So the books I read in 2022, I think most of them I can assign a superlative to it. So it's kind of like a book award made with superlatives. I'll put a couple of channels that have done something similar to it. In terms of the superlatives that I've used, it is not necessarily a specific list. I just came up with a few that I think would be interesting to assign a book to. Let's get right into it. The book that was the most surprising for me, that's gonna be Book of Night by Holly Black. This was surprising not necessarily because of the book, but because of how it was received when it got released. I think pretty much everyone on BookTube really disliked this book. A lot of people that I follow vehemently disliked this book, and I was just so confused because I read it, I enjoyed it. It's not the greatest masterpiece, but it is what I was expecting from Holly Black. It is her first adult novel. I think she did pretty well. It is short. The world building is not necessarily super well developed. Apart from that, it's not that bad. But people had a lot of feelings about it, and so I was so shocked because once again I have an opinion that differs, but it's very interesting that I enjoyed this book and most people didn't, and I'm a bit confused as to why. It could be because the rest of the books that I've read are not great. I didn't really enjoy my 2022 reads, so it could be why, but that's very shocking to me. So that was the most surprising, I would say. The next one is gonna be the most disappointing book, and that's gonna be Self-Portrait with Nothing by Aimee Pokwatka. And honestly, this was the most disappointing because I just thought I was gonna love it. If you have watched my past video about this book, every year Tor, which is a publisher, publishes a debut sampler of a few new releases that are gonna be upcoming that year, and usually it's about 1 to 2 chapters of each debut. And so I had made a vlog and I had read that sampler, and I had the first chapter of this book in the sampler. I loved it so much, that was my favorite, and I actually loved it so much that I went ahead and bought the book because I was expecting it to be so good. Because of that first chapter, I was just very intrigued. The premise was basically that there is this painter who is believed to create paintings where you can see other universes, or you can see yourself in another universe, but she disappeared. And so I was extremely intrigued. I thought we were going to follow her assistant, but right in the second chapter we changed perspective and we're not following him anymore. I guess the story that it told was not the story I was expecting, and so it was not the story I wanted. So it's not really the fault of the book, it's just that from the first chapter, I thought it was going in a certain direction, and that's what I wanted, and that's not what I got. It wasn't like necessarily bad. There are a few things I enjoyed, but overall I think the pace was very slow. Maybe I'll pick something up by this author in the future, but I don't think the writing in the end was what I got from chapter 1, which is mind-boggling to me because I thought the writing later on was just overly done, and that's something that I usually don't enjoy. So very interesting, but this is the most disappointing for me. Next we have the most enjoyable read, and that's gonna be an ebook that I read called Silver in the Wood. Unfortunately, I didn't write the name of the author, but you'll have it here. And I just loved this story so much. I really had a great time reading it. I just wanted to keep continuing reading. It's like a novella, it's not really long at all, and it was so fantastic in its writing. It was quite lyrical but not too strong on that side, and it was also quite dark with the themes, so I really enjoyed it, and to the point where I went and looked for other books that the author had released. And I know that there was a sequel to that book that I have been reading. I had started, unfortunately I lost my spot with my library, so as soon as I get it back, it's taking a while, but as soon as I get it back I'll finish it for sure. It's cute and tender while being dark in places, but it's exactly what I like. If you know my taste, then that's the sort of taste I like in a sort of romantic fantasy novel. And then opposite to that, the least enjoyable to read was The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentle. I've talked ad nauseam about this. This book was just not for me. I think the writing did not mesh with me at all. The way the plot was done, it just didn't make sense. I think it was really hard to get into it. Also, the synopsis I had read was completely different from what the story actually is. Basically, this is a story within a story, and I never knew that. I literally thought the story was happening, and I guess it is happening inside the book, but you know it's not real because you know it's a book. So I really thought there was going to be a murder in the library. Anyway, it wasn't great, it wasn't even good. Not for me. Next we have The Most Underwhelming, and that goes to the Book of Cold Cases by Simon St. James. Literally a boring book, and this is a thriller. How a thriller is a boring book, I don't get it. I enjoyed a little bit at the beginning. I was excited to see that the main character had a forum for true crimes. I thought that could be interesting to explore. Unfortunately, it wasn't really well done. I don't know that it was fully integrated into the storyline, and the rest of the story was just, I don't know, it was just lackluster. The premise is that this person gets chosen by someone who had been accused to be a serial killer in the past, like years ago, and that person decides to tell her story, and so she chooses the main character to do so. And from then on, we learn more about this, but honestly, the premise is more interesting than the book. So next we have The Most Overwhelming, and by this I mean the book that was a bit of a mess. I usually don't really like talking too negatively about self-published books, but A Rune of Roses by K.F. Breen was definitely not for me. It was a bit all over the place in terms of the plot, in terms of the writing style. Sometimes it felt kind of old-timey, and sometimes it was way too modern. Ultimately, the story didn't make much sense to me, and also I think more than anything, the little blurb that the author writes will tell you everything. You wanted more spice, you wanted crass, you wanted me to go wild, you got it. And I didn't know. I just did not know. I didn't know that was gonna be like this, and from the reviews I had seen on Amazon, it was praised for being such a romantic book, or at least the romance being so good, and I just didn't find it great at all. I don't think the male lead was really doing much. I don't think there was much there in terms of romance. This is a fantasy romance, and that's something I really want to explore a bit more because it's a genre that I like. Unfortunately, this wasn't it for me. Next, we have The Best Plot. I picked this one just because the rest of the books I read, the plot was not necessarily anything special. So this one is The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward, and I really enjoyed this book. I think the plot was interesting. I think it did things that where I don't want to say new, but it had sort of a fresh quality to the story. I would say that in terms of pacing, this is a bit on the slower pace. This is a horror book, and I think it really delivered in the suspense and in the twist and the answers that you get. Yeah, I really enjoyed that book. And obviously we're gonna be talking about the worst plot. And for this one, I've got just the right book, The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. Are you sick and tired of hearing me talking about this book? Well, I am. This book had a great premise, but in terms of the plot, that was, I mean, he delivered ridiculous plots before, but this one, there was very, very little setup for the twists, especially one. I think it had two twists. I think the second was just dumb and unnecessary. The first one was unrealistic, completely out of nowhere. I think he did such a poor job at plotting this book, and it shows. So here you go. Then we have the best characterization, and for this one I'm gonna go with The Bronzed Beast by Roshani Chokshi, and this is the third book in the Gilded Wolves trilogy. I had enjoyed the first two books so much. Unfortunately, this one was not my favorite. The ending, or I guess the way the story was being wrapped up, it was just not what I was hoping for. Even though I, understand and appreciate what the story said and how it ended, it was just not what I wanted. And that's okay, like that's what the author wanted to write, and maybe other readers would enjoy. It's just I was expecting more. I was expecting more on different aspects, and I just don't think that was necessarily the point of that book. So it kind of missed the mark there. But in terms of the characters, I love those characters so much, and I just want to get back into this world and just see them interact. And yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about those characters for a while. They were so deeply studied, and I could understand their personality. They all had their own little quirks, and you could see their qualities and their flaws. Really well done, so for sure. And then we're gonna talk about the worst characterization, and that's gonna be an ebook that I read, which was The Long Weekend. Once again, I don't have the author, but it's gonna be here. I mean, first of all, the plot was something, but the characters, they were so unbelievable. They were like, the villains were like mustache twirling villains. It was ridiculous. Wow. Talking about depth, those had none. So surface level. There was a lot of characters actually, and I kept on like mixing up a few of the wives. This was supposed to be a thriller. I was excited about it, but I went into it cautiously. That's why I didn't purchase it. That was a good call. So yeah, would not recommend that one either. And next we have the best cover. I think from the books I read in 2022, for sure, it's gonna be this one. This is The Hollow Heart by Mary Rutkowski. And this sort of pinkish red is one of my favorite colors. Even though I don't like pink, I do like pink. The cover is just so beautiful. I specifically asked for this cover, which is the UK cover, because I really disliked how they decided to change halfway through a freaking duology to change the covers. Why would you do that? So I'm so glad my sister got me that one, and it's just so pretty. I love it so much, 100%. And then the next one, I was thinking of talking about the worst cover, but I kind of feel bad about that because I don't think the books that I've read had a bad cover, to be frank. I mean, if anything, maybe this one, like nothing's too special about this, or this one, I don't necessarily love that there's a skull in it, but honestly, like I don't think there's anything that bad from what I've read, so yeah. I wouldn't mind displaying them, so that means that I don't think any of the books I've read in 2022 had a really bad cover. So I don't think I talked about all of the books that I've read, but I think I've talked about most of them. There were other superlatives I could think about, but I don't think I had read enough to associate a book to it. Anyway, so if you enjoyed this video, please let me know down below what was the most surprising book of the year for you, and which book had the best plot, because I'd be super intrigued to read that. Alright, so if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.